Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Now, for today's video, it might surprise you to learn that we're not benchmarking a new CPU, APU, or even a GPU. Instead, we're checking out a slick new computer case from Corsair. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Obsidian series, and many of the models like the massive 900D or the slightly less massive 750D have been around for some time now, and they're still popular choices today. In fact, it's been quite a few years since Corsair refreshed the Obsidian lineup with a new face, but today that all changes with the introduction of the Obsidian Series 500D, and it's certainly a departure from the norm. With the exception of the original 550D, every Obsidian model has followed the exact same design cues. The 500D though throws everything out the window. Corsair says the 500D is a state-of-the-art mid-tower designed for enthusiasts, featuring smoked tempered glass side doors with premium aluminium trimmings. Obviously, looks are subjective, but I think most will agree that the new 500D is a sleek-looking computer case that's a bit more adventurous than the traditional Obsidian cases. Before we get into the looks, I would like to just quickly note that this mid-tower measures 508mm tall, 502mm deep, and 233mm wide. Empty, it tips the scales at 10.25 kilograms, which is reasonable given the size and the sheer amount of glass that's included. Corsair has also slapped it with an MSRP of $140 US, but we'll talk more about the value aspect of this case towards the end of the video. Getting back to the design, the case manages to merge clean lines with subtle curves really well, and the front panel is a great example of this. At first, the front panel appears to be a solid piece of brushed aluminium, but it's actually mostly plastic that's then wrapped in a sheet of thin brushed aluminium. I can't help but feel a solid aluminium panel would have probably worked better here and matched the side panels a lot better. Speaking of the door panels, they are mostly smoked tempered glass, but at the leading edges they are attached to some thick aluminium trimmings, which not just help make up the front panel, but they also act as handles, so that's creative and it looks very good. Both the left and right side tempered glass panels are hinged for quick and convenient access. It was also great to find that when laying the case down flat, which makes it a bit easier to install hardware inside, that the hinged doors didn't just fall off, as this is a problem I've run into with a few other cases, believe it or not. To avoid this happening, Corsair has actually placed a screw at the top of the hinge, stopping it from being able to move past that, and if you do want to remove the hinge, then you have to undo the screw first, and then it simply slides out of place. When it comes to opening and closing the doors, they actually lock into place really nicely using magnets. Though I did notice a few times when moving the case around, so that is to say leaning on its side or something like that, the doors would just fly open and smash into whatever was in their way, so you best be careful of that and try and hold the doors shut as you move the case around. Moving around to the top of the case, we find an interesting sort of winged type looking top panel constructed entirely from aluminium. It's also raised up at the sides to allow for better airflow, but there are a heap of sort of triangular shaped ventilation straight down the middle of it as well, so plenty of ventilation on this top panel. Then at the front, in the gap between where the top and front panels meet, there's a smart little I/O panel featuring two USB 3.0 ports, a power and reset button, two audio jacks, and wait for it, a USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port. Now I know a lot of you guys will appreciate that, so good stuff there, Corsair. Underneath the case there really isn't anything too exciting going on. There's four pretty standard looking plastic feet and a removable dust filter for the PSU. Then finally around the back, it's also a pretty standard affair. You have 7 expansion slots, PSU in the bottom of course, and a rear mounted 120mm fan, which we'll look at a bit more closely in a moment. Before jumping inside and checking out the interior of the 500D, I should just note that there is also a large removable dust filter in the top and front of the case, and these are both very easy to get at. The top filter is held in place by 4 magnets, while the front filter gets 8. Both can be easily removed in a matter of seconds without the need of tools, so it's a really great design by Corsair. Now, getting inside the case, we find a separate but quite compact basement section for the PSU, and that can be opened up if need be for extra long PSUs. Corsair's also provided a grommet in the top of the PSU cover for running power cables to, say, your graphics card. All 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch storage is found behind the motherboard tray, and here you can fit 2 3.5-inch drives and 3 2.5-inch drives. Corsair's also provided removable drive trays for mounting these drives, and in the case of the 3.5-inch models, it's a toolless design. For those of you after a few more storage options, I suspect at some point you will be able to purchase a drive cage that'll probably feature something like 3 more trays, and that'll sit adjacent from the PSU shroud. That location by default though is reserved for those wanting to install liquid cooling gear, and here you could install a pump and reservoir combo, for example. Corsair's also provided mounting holes for all the commonly used kits. Speaking of liquid cooling, the 500D has room for up to a 280mm or 360mm radiator in the front, a 120mm radiator in the back, and a 240mm or 280mm radiator in the top. Corsair has also made the installation of the radiators and fans very easy by including removable fan trays, and these can be found in the top and front of the case. Essentially what these fan trays allow you to do is install the radiator and fans, or just the fans, whatever you're going for, but you can do this outside of the case, so you don't have to work in the confinements of the case itself. As you might have guessed, given the radiator support, you can install either 3 120mm or 2 140mm fans in the front, and 2 120mm or 140mm fans in the top. By default, the 500D comes with a 120mm pre-installed fan in the front, it's in the central location, and then there's one also in the rear. When it comes to clearance, the 500D will support graphics cards as long as 370mm, so that covers pretty much every model I'm aware of. CPU coolers can stand as tall as 170mm, and again that covers pretty much all of them. Then we have the PSU, which can stretch as long as 225mm, so again you'll be hard pressed to find something that doesn't fit in this generously sized mid-tower case. Corsair has also made it possible to not just install full-length graphics cards, but you can also take advantage of the new vertical mounting fad that really took off last year. That said, I don't really recommend you take advantage of this feature if you can help yourself. With an air-cooled graphics card, for example, it just sits simply too close to the glass panel, and this will really restrict airflow. Additionally, you will need to purchase the PCIe riser cable separately, and Corsair says that this standalone accessory will be available from them soon. These things, though, they're never cheap, and a good quality shielded version will usually set you back well over $50 US. And I've found that even the good ones do introduce a small amount of latency, so keep that in mind as well. Finally, when it comes to cable management, the 500D looks after you very well, and it's really just a pleasure to build in. Corsair has included their removable cable routing cover, which makes it possible to create a build that looks clean from all angles, which is important given it has glass panels on both sides. Making life easier are included Velcro straps and cable routing grommets for quick and easy cable routing. For my test build, I installed the MSI X399 Pro Carbon AC, a standard ATX motherboard supporting the big and bold Threadripper CPUs, and of course I installed the granddaddy, the 1950X. The graphics card of choice was the MSI GTX 1080 Ti Trio, and what a beast that thing is. Then in terms of cooling, I really wanted to give the Corsair H150i Pro a whirl, but unfortunately right now it doesn't support the TR4 socket, so instead I was forced to test with the Noctua U14S TR4 SP3, as well as the Enermax Lictech 280 TR4 all-in-one liquid cooler, and I do believe it's called Lictech, but not 100% sure on that one. Anyway, moving along. Although the Noctua U14S stands 165mm tall, it will fit with room to spare, and with the out-of-the-box fan configuration, that is to say the two 120mm fans that come pre-installed in the 500D, temperatures were great. The CPU ran at just 61 degrees under full load, and the GTX 1080 Ti Trio from MSI never went above 58 degrees when gaming, so that is an exceptional result. So in terms of temperatures, it seems quite good, but I really just wanted to dress the 500D up, so I stripped out the stock fans and replaced them with Corsair's flashy high airflow ML series, and I installed the Enermax Lictech 280 at the same time. This meant we now had 3 120mm ML fans in the front drawing air in, and 2 140mm ML fans on the top pushing air out through the Lictech 280mm radiator. Then finally, for something a little bit different, I went with a 120mm LL model in the rear, used that as an exhaust fan, and well, what an RGB bonanza it was. This configuration dropped the GTX 1080 Ti Trio load temp down to just 52 degrees, and the Lictech 280 saw the 1950X max out at just 58 degrees, which again is just another exceptional result. Both the CPU and GPU were left stock for these tests. I actually haven't had time to tinker with the overclocking, but this is certainly something I would like to explore with this system in a future video. In order to really show off the Obsidian Series 500D and all of the glorious PC hardware inside, you really need to install a few LED light strips. And we're certainly not opposed to some RGB goodness here at Harbour Unboxed, as long as it's not a case of form over function anyway. I feel like the 500D does a good job of balancing looks with practicality. It's a sleek looking case that doesn't sacrifice airflow to give that clean look that a lot of cases seem to be doing at the moment, and build quality is extremely high, as you would expect from a Corsair case, and the features that it does include are of the highest quality. Most mid-towers are priced between $75 and $100 US, so the 500D is certainly a premium product, and you could fault Corsair for not providing any extras such as LED light strips or even a fan controller. I personally would have liked to see at least one of these things included for the $140 US asking price, but I'm also grateful that the features that are included, such as the hinged tempered glass doors, are of the highest quality. It's also worth noting that the 750D can often be had for around $130 US, despite the fact that it does have a $160 US MSRP, so chances are it won't be too long before you can get the 500D at a more competitive price. So, in a nutshell, the 500D is a well put together case that's really second to none, especially in terms of design and build quality. It's a little pricey at $140 US, but we've come to expect a premium from Corsair for their higher end products. Overall though, I really like what the Obsidian Series 500D has to offer, and I think I've found my new backdrop PC for 2018. And that's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit the like button, subscribe for more content. If you appreciate what we do here at Harbour Unboxed, then consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.